The stars above Earth looked peaceful that night. People in cities around the world slept in their beds. Children dreamed of tomorrow. Parents rested after long days of work. No one knew that in the cold darkness of space, 200 massive warships had just appeared out of nowhere. Captain Yuna. Park sat alone in the Earth Defense Command Center. It was a small room hidden deep underground in Seoul. Screens covered every wall. Most nights, nothing happened. Yuna would drink her coffee, watch the stars through satellite feeds, and wait for her shift to end. But tonight was different. At exactly 3:42 in the morning, her main screen turned red. A warning sound filled the room. Yuna set down her coffee and looked at the data. Her hands began to shake. 200 objects. Each one was larger than any building on Earth. They had appeared near the moon and were now moving toward the planet. These were not asteroids. These were not natural. The shapes were too perfect, too organized. Yuna picked up her phone and made a call that would change everything. Far across the world, Admiral Tae-kong was sleeping in his small house in Busan. He was 73 years old. His hair was white, and his body was tired from decades of service. Most people thought he was retired. Most people were wrong when his phone rang. Tae opened his eyes immediately. He had been waiting for this call for 40 years. He had hoped it would never come. But deep in his heart, he knew it would. Admiral Yuna's voice said through the phone. "They're here." Tae sat up slowly. He looked out his window at the quiet city below. Lights twinkled in apartment buildings. A couple walked their dog on the street. Everything looked so normal, so peaceful. "How many?" Tae asked. 200 warships. "They're moving toward Earth. Estimated arrival in 1 hour." Tae closed his eyes. 1 hour. That was all humanity had. But maybe, just maybe, it would be enough. "Activate Protocol Omega," he said quietly. "I'm on my way." In the years after humans first walked on the moon, they found something unexpected on Mars. Hidden beneath the red dust was an ancient city. It was millions of years old. Every building was destroyed. Every street was burned. And in the center of that dead city, humans found a message carved into stone. The message was a warning. It spoke of creatures from distant stars. Creatures who traveled from world to world, taking everything, destroying everyone. The beings who wrote the message called these invaders the Velen, and the message ended with 3 simple words: "They will come." Humanity read that warning, and humanity prepared. For 80 years, every major nation on Earth worked together in secret. They built weapons that could reach across the stars. They hid them in the moon, in asteroids, and in deep tunnels beneath the Earth. They trained soldiers and engineers. They waited. Now the waiting was over. High Commander Rin stood on the bridge of his flagship. He was tall, almost 3 meters, with gray skin and 4 arms. His eyes were black and cold. He had conquered 11 species in his lifetime. He had watched entire civilizations bow before him. To Rin, this small blue planet was just another meal. "Scan the planet," Rin ordered. His officers worked at their stations. Data flowed across their screens. "Commander, the planet has 8 billion life forms. They call themselves humans. Technology level is primitive. Basic space travel. No significant weapons detected," Rin smiled. This was the same story he had heard many times before. Young species always thought they were special. They always thought they could resist. They were always wrong. "Send the message," Rin said. Across Earth, every television, phone, and computer screen suddenly went dark. Then, a new image appeared. It was Rin's face. His cold eyes stared at humanity. "People of Earth," his translated voice boomed, "the Velen Empire has claimed your world. You have 2 choices. Surrender, and some of you will live as servants. Resist, and we will burn your planet to ash. You have 1 hour to decide." The screens went dark again. In cities around the world, panic began. People screamed. Some cried. Others ran into the streets, not knowing where to go. Governments tried to calm their citizens. It did not work. But deep underground, There was no panic. Only purpose. President Hannah Shin walked into the war room beneath the Blue House in Seoul. She was 54 years old, with sharp eyes and steady hands. She had been briefed about this possibility on her first day in office. She had prayed it would never happen, but she was ready. Status report, she said. Defense Minister Min Ho-cho stood beside a large display screen. All Protocol Omega assets are coming online. The orbital platforms are charging. The lunar installations are operational. We will be ready in 14 minutes. 14 minutes. That was how long it would take to fully power the weapons that humanity had hidden for so long. President Shin nodded. Open a channel to the alien fleet.
Oh, not the Velen flagship.
Rin was surprised when a transmission came from Earth. He had not expected these creatures to respond so quickly. Perhaps they wanted to surrender early. That would make things easier. A woman's face appeared on his screen. She was small, fragile-looking, with dark hair and calm eyes. She did not look afraid. That was strange. I am President Hannah Shin of United Earth, the woman said. I am giving you 60 seconds to withdraw your fleet from our solar system. This is not a request. This is not a negotiation. This is mercy. Rin stared at the screen. Then he began to laugh. The sound was deep and cold. Mercy, he said. Little creature, we have destroyed 23 species. We have burned worlds older than your entire civilization. What could you possibly do to us? President Shin's expression did not change. She looked almost sad. You have 50 seconds remaining. In the command center, Unipark watched the countdown on her screen. Her heart was beating fast, but her hands were steady. Beside her, other officers worked in silence. They all knew what was about to happen. They all knew there was no going back. The clock showed 14 minutes remaining. Yuna whispered to herself. They have no idea what they just woke up. High Commander Rin watched the human woman on his screen with amusement. She was so small, so weak. Her species had only learned to fly 100 years ago. They had barely touched their own moon. And yet here she was, giving him a warning. Rin had lived for 300 years. He had watched stars die. He had seen civilizations crumble into dust. This little creature thought she could frighten him with words. It was almost funny. Your 60 seconds had passed, he said with a cruel smile. What now, little human? Will you throw rocks at my ships? President Hannah Shin's face remained calm. Her eyes were steady. She did not blink. Then you have made your choice, she said quietly. I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that we gave you a chance to leave. The screen went dark. Rin turned to his officers. Begin the invasion. Destroy their military installations first, then their cities. Leave the survivors for collection. His officers nodded and began working at their stations. Around the flagship, 200 warships started moving toward Earth, their weapons charged with energy that could level mountains. But something strange was happening. On one of the sensor stations, a young Velen officer noticed unusual readings. Small energy signatures were appearing all across Earth's solar system. They had not been there before. They were hidden in asteroids, on the moon, and in the space between planets. Commander, the officer said nervously, I am detecting unknown energy sources. Thousands of them. Rin frowned. What kind of energy? I don't know, Commander. The readings are unlike anything in our database. They seem to be weapons of some kind. For the first time in many years, Rin felt something cold touch his heart. Not fear, not yet. Just a small whisper of doubt. Impossible, he said. These creatures are primitive. They cannot have weapons we don't recognize. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, Defense Minister Min Ho-cho watched the global activation display. Green lights were appearing on the map one by one. Each light represented a weapon platform coming online. There were thousands of them. Lunar Array 1 is charged, an officer reported. Civic platform is ready, said another. Antarctic station is operational. Asteroid. Belt network is connected. Minho took a deep breath. Humanity had spent 80 years building these weapons in secret. Every major nation had contributed, Factories hidden underground had worked day and night. Scientists had given their entire lives to this project. Many had died without ever seeing the result. Now, the result was here.
Ouch.
Contact Admiral Kang, Minho said. Tell him we are ready. Admiral Tae Kong had arrived at the Central Command Station, hidden inside a mountain in the Korean countryside. He walked slowly because of his age, but his mind was sharp. Around him, young officers moved quickly, preparing systems and checking data. Tae looked at the main display. It showed Earth surrounded by the Velen fleet. 200 warships. Millions of alien soldiers. Weapons that could crack continents. By all normal logic, humanity should have no chance. But humanity had not played by normal logic. Engineer Sorabik approached the Admiral. She was a young woman with tired eyes and oil-stained hands. She had spent 15 years working on the weapons that were now ready to fire. Admiral Sora said, "The Cascade Protocol is ready. All 12 primary platforms are charged. 800 hammer rounds are prepared for launch." Tae nodded slowly. "And the targeting?" 17 Velen worlds confirmed. Their homeworld, all major colonies, and their fleet production centers. Travel time through hyperspace is approximately 4 minutes. Tae closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about what was about to happen. Not one world destroyed, but 17. Billions of lives ended in an instant. It was terrible. It was horrifying. But he also thought about the dead city on Mars. He thought about the warning carved in stone. He thought about the 23 species the Velen had already erased from existence. Those beings had families too. They had dreams. They had futures. The Velen had taken everything from them. Now, it was time to pay the bill, Admiral and officer said. The Velen fleet is approaching attack range. They will be able to fire on our cities in approximately 6 minutes. Tae opened his eyes. His face was hard. "Show them what fear looks like," he said quietly. "Fire." Across the solar system, hidden weapons began to activate. On the moon, massive launchers rose from underground bunkers. In the asteroid belt, platforms that had looked like ordinary rocks suddenly opened like flowers. Beneath the Pacific Ocean, missiles rose from secret silos. The hammer rounds were beautiful and terrible. Each one was a ball of compressed matter wrapped in magnetic fields. They were small, only about the size of a car. But inside each one was the power to crack a planet. 800 hammer rounds launched at the same moment. They accelerated to impossible speeds, then vanished into hyperspace. Their targets were not the Velen fleet above Earth. Their targets were far, far away. On the Velen flagship, alarms began to scream. "Commander!" The sensor officer shouted. "I'm detecting massive projectile launches." Hundreds of them. Rin grabbed the edge of his command chair. "Intercept them. Destroy them." "I can't, Commander. They've already entered hyperspace." They're traveling faster than our fastest ships." "Where are they going?" The officer's gray face turned pale. His 4 hands trembled as he checked the data. "Commander, the trajectory. They're heading for our homeworld." "For all our worlds." Silence fell over the bridge. Every Velen officer stared at their screens in disbelief. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Velen Empire was not the hunter. They were the prey. Rin felt his legs grow weak. "How long until impact?" "For minutes, Commander. Maybe less." For minutes. That was all the time his species had left. For minutes, and his entire civilization would be gone. Rin grabbed the communication controls. "Open a channel to Earth. Now." President Hanashin's face appeared on his screen again. She looked the same as before, calm, steady. But now Rin could see something else in her eyes. Not hatred, not anger. Just cold, terrible certainty. "Please," Rin said. The word felt strange in his mouth. He had never said it before. "Stop the weapons. We surrender. We will leave. We will never return, please." President Shin shook her head slowly. "Your fleet attacked us at 3:42 in the morning," she said. "At 3:56, your empire will cease to exist. You had 60 seconds to leave. You chose this. The screen went dark. In the command center, Lieutenant Jae-yoon monitored the hammer rounds as they flew through hyperspace. He was only 25 years old. He had trained his whole life for this moment. He had hoped it would never come. Captain Yuna Park stood beside him. Her face was pale but determined. How long? She asked. Jay checked his display. For minutes. Yuna nodded. Around them, the command center was silent. Everyone was watching. Everyone was waiting. The countdown continued. For minutes until the end of an empire. For minutes until humanity became something new. For minutes until the galaxy learned to fear the creatures from the small blue planet. The hammer rounds flew through hyperspace like angry ghosts. They moved faster than light, faster than thought, faster than any prayer could follow. Inside each small ball of compressed matter was enough energy to crack a world, and 800 of them were racing towards 17 planets. On Earth, engineer Sora Beek sat at her control station and watched the data streams. She had helped design these weapons. She had spent 15 years of her life making sure they would work. Now, she wished they didn't have to. Sora was 38 years old. She had a daughter who was 7. This morning, before the alarms began, she had been planning her daughter's birthday party. Now, she was watching the countdown to the end of an empire. Rounds are stable, she reported quietly. Hyperspace transit is smooth. No malfunctions detected. Admiral Taekong nodded. He stood in the center of the command room like an old tree that had weathered many storms. His white hair glowed in the light of the display screens. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes were heavy with the weight of what was happening. Time to impact? He asked. 3 minutes and 40 seconds, Lieutenant Jae-yoon answered. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. That was all that remained of the Velen Empire. Billions of lives. Thousands of years of history. Cities that had stood for generations. All of it would be gone before most humans finished their morning coffee. On the Velen flagship above Earth, Commander Rin was trying desperately to find a solution. His officers were working at their stations with frantic energy. Some were trying to warn the homeworld. Others were calculating interception possibilities. None of it was working. Commander, one officer said with a shaking voice. Homeworld Command is not responding. Our signals cannot reach them faster than the projectiles. What about our defense platforms? Rin demanded. The homeworld has shields, weapons. Sir, the projectiles are traveling at 40% of light speed. Our defense systems were never designed for this. Nothing was designed for this. Rin slammed his 4 fists against his command chair. The metal dented under his strength. He had conquered worlds. He had crushed armies. He had never felt helpless before. The feeling was like drowning in ice water. How? He whispered. How did they do this? They are primitives. They should not have this technology. The sensor officer looked up from his station. His face was gray with fear. Commander, I have analyzed the projectiles. The technology. It is based on designs from the Marathi. Silence fell over the bridge. The Marathi. Rin remembered them. They had been a peaceful species who lived on a beautiful green world. They had great scientists and artists. They had welcomed the Velen with open arms, hoping to make friends. The Velen had killed them all. Every man, woman, and child. They had burned their cities and poisoned their oceans. They had erased the Marathi from existence like cleaning dirt from a window. That was 5 million years ago. Impossible, Rin said. The Marathi are extinct. We destroyed everything. Not everything, the sensor officer replied. The humans found something. They found Marathi ruins. They found their technology, and they improved it. Rin understood now. The humans had discovered what the Velen had done. They had seen the graves of a dead species, and they had decided that it would never happen to them. The Velen had created their own destruction. On Earth, Captain Yuna Park watched the Velen fleet through satellite feeds. The alien ships were not moving anymore. They hung in space like lost children, waiting for something that would never come. Waiting for salvation that did not exist. They're trying to contact their homeworld again, Yuna reported. No response. Admiral Taekong walked slowly to the main display. He looked at the blue dot that represented Earth. He looked at the red dots that represented the Velen fleet. And he looked at the green lines that showed the paths of the hammer-rounds. When I was a young man, he said quietly, I visited the ruins on Mars. I stood in the streets of a dead city. I saw the bones of beings who had lived and loved and dreamed just like us. And I read their final message. He paused. The room was silent. They wrote, We trusted them. We welcomed them. Right. Do not make our mistake. Do not show mercy to those who show none. That message was 5 million years old. It was written in blood and tears. And we listened. Sorabik looked down at her hands. They were steady, but inside, she felt like crying. She was a mother, a daughter, a human being with a heart that could break, and she was helping to kill billions. Is there no other way? She asked softly. Admiral Kong turned to look at her. His old eyes were gentle but firm. The Velen have destroyed 23 species. 23 entire peoples, gone forever. They came here to do the same to us. If we stop the hammer rounds, they will send more fleets. They will keep coming until we are all dead. He shook his head slowly. This is not revenge. This is surgery. We are cutting out a cancer so that the rest of the galaxy can live. The countdown continued. 2 minutes remained. On the Velen homeworld, people went about their daily lives. Children played in parks under purple skies. Workers traveled to their jobs in floating vehicles. Old couples sat in gardens and remembered better days. I'd not know that death was coming. They did not know that in 2 minutes their world would end. High Commander Rin stood alone in the center of his bridge. His officers had stopped working. There was nothing left to do. Some were crying. Others were praying to gods they had not believed in for centuries. Rin just stood and stared at the main screen. He thought about his life, his victories, his conquests. He had always believed that power was everything, that the strong had the right to take from the weak, that mercy was foolishness. Now he understood the truth. Power was temporary. Cruelty was remembered. And the universe had a way of balancing accounts. 1 minute to impact, Lieutenant Jae Yoon announced. Captain Yuna Park took a deep breath. Around her, officers held hands. Some closed their eyes. Others whispered prayers or final messages to loved ones. Everyone understood that something terrible was about to happen. Something that could never be undone. President Hannah Shin's voice came through the speakers. She had been watching from the war room. For every species they destroyed, she said quietly. For every world they burned. For every child they murdered. Today, justice arrives. The countdown reached 0 across the galaxy. 800 hammer rounds emerged from hyperspace and struck their targets at the same moment. The results were instantaneous and absolute. Planets cracked like eggs. Oceans boiled into steam. Mountains turned to dust. Billions of lives ended between one heartbeat and the next. In the command center, the screen showed data that the human mind could barely understand. 17 worlds died in the span of 3 seconds. An empire that had lasted 10,000 years was erased, like writing on a CHLKBOA, and on the Velen flagship above Earth. High Commander Rin felt his connection to his people vanish. Millions of voices that had always been in his mind went silent. His family, his friends. His entire civilization gone, he fell to his knees and screamed. The universe seemed to hold its breath. In the cold darkness of space, 200 Velen warships floated above Earth like lost souls. Their weapons were charged. Their soldiers were ready. But none of them moved. None of them could hide. Commander Rin knelt on the floor of his bridge. His forearms hung limp at his sides. His black eyes stared at nothing. The screams of his crew filled the air, but he could not hear them. All he could hear was silence. The terrible silence where his people used to be. For his entire life, Rin had felt connected to his species through a mental bond. It was like a warm ocean that always surrounded him. Every Velen could feel every other Velen. They shared thoughts, emotions, memories. It was what made them strong. It was what made them one. Now, that ocean was empty. Billions of voices had been speaking a moment ago. Now, there was nothing. Just cold, endless silence. Commander, a young officer said through tears. What do we do? Commander, please, tell us what to do. Rin slowly raised his head. He looked at his crew. They were young. So young. They had joined the fleet, dreaming of glory and conquest. They had never imagined this. None of them had. What is the status of the fleet? Rin asked. His voice was hollow, like an echo from an empty cave. The tactical officer wiped his eyes and checked his screens. All ships are operational, Commander. We still have full weapons capability. We could destroy their cities. We could make them pay. Rin looked at the blue planet below. Earth, such a small world. Such ordinary-looking creatures. And yet in 14 minutes, they had done what no one in the galaxy had ever done. They had killed an empire. No, Rin said quietly. Commander. What would be the point? Rin stood slowly. His legs were weak, but he forced himself to stay upright. Our home world is gone. Our colonies are gone. Our future is gone. Even if we destroy this planet, we are still dead. We are just ghosts now. On Earth, Admiral Tai Kong watched the Velen fleet through satellite feeds. The alien ships had not moved since the hammer round struck. They hung in orbit like statues, their weapons still pointed at the planet below. Why aren't they attacking? Captain Unipark asked. Admiral Kang shook his head slowly. They're in shock. They just felt billions of their people die. Their minds are connected, you know. They feel each other's pain, each other's death. Right now, every Velen in that fleet is experiencing the end of their world. Una thought about that. She tried to imagine feeling her entire species die at once. The pain would be unbearable. The loneliness would be infinite. For a moment, she almost felt sorry for them. What do we do now? She asked. Admiral Kang turned to face the room. Officers were standing at their stations, waiting for orders. Some were crying quietly. Others looked sick. Everyone understood that something enormous had just happened. Something that changed everything. We wait, the Admiral said, and we pray that this never has to happen again. In the war room beneath Seoul, President Hannah Shin sat alone at a long table. Her advisors had left to give her privacy. She stared at the wall, seeing nothing. In her hand was a small photograph. It showed a young woman with a bright smile, standing in front of a university building. Her daughter, her only child. The girl was 20 years old and studying medicine. She wanted to help people. She wanted to heal the sick and comfort the dying. President Shin had just killed billions of people to keep that girl safe. Was it worth it? She whispered to herself. There was no answer. There could never be an answer to a question like that. Defense Minister Min Ho-cho entered the room quietly. He was a large man with a serious face, but tonight he looked tired. He sat down across from the president and said nothing for a long moment. The International Council is meeting, he finally said. They want to discuss next steps. President Shin nodded slowly. What are they saying? Some are celebrating. Others are horrified. Most are still trying to understand what happened. The Americans want to finish off the fleet. The Europeans want to capture them for study. The Chinese want to make contact and negotiate surrender. And what do you think? Minho looked at the photograph in her hand. He had a daughter too. She was 15 years old and loved to paint pictures of flowers. I think we did what we had to do, he said quietly. And I think we will spend the rest of our lives wondering if there was another way. On the Velen flagship, High Commander Rin finally gave his last order. Open a channel to Earth. I wish to speak with their president. The communication screen flickered to life. President Hannah Shin's face appeared. She looked older than she had 14 minutes ago. Her eyes were tired and sad. Commander, she said. President. Rin's voice was calm now, empty. I am going to surrender my fleet to you, We will power down our weapons and submit to whatever you decide.
Ow!
President Shin nodded slowly. Why? Because there is nothing left to fight for. Rin looked down at his hands. We came here to conquer. We came here because we believed we were superior. We believed that our power gave us the right to take whatever we wanted. He looked up at the screen. We were wrong. You showed us that power means nothing, that all our ships and weapons and soldiers could not protect us from justice. We thought you were primitive. We thought you were weak. We were fools. President Shin was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle. I did not want this, Commander. I did not want any of this. But you gave us no choice. I know. Rin straightened himself. For the first time, he looked like the commander he used to be. My species made its choice 10,000 years ago, when we decided to become conquerors. We chose to build our empire on the bones of the innocent. Today, we finally paid the price. He raised his hand in a gesture that might have been a salute. Earth has won. Do with us what you will. Screen went dark. In the command center, Lieutenant Jae-yoon let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. Around him, officers were beginning to talk again. Some were making calls to family. Others were checking systems. The crisis was over. The battle was won, but Jay didn't feel like celebrating. He looked at the screens showing the silent Velen fleet. 200 ships full of beings who had lost everything, who would never see their homes again, who would spend the rest of their lives knowing that their entire species had been destroyed in 14 minutes. It's over, Captain, Unipark said quietly. Jay nodded. But nothing will ever be the same, will it? Una looked at Earth, blue and beautiful on the main display. Somewhere down there, people were waking up. They were making breakfast and getting ready for work. Most of them didn't even know what had happened. No, she said. Nothing will ever be the same. 3 months passed. Spring came to Earth. Cherry blossoms bloomed in Seoul. Children played in parks. People went to work and came home to their families. Life continued, as it always does. But everything had changed. The news of what happened spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every species, every world, every civilization heard the story. The Velen Empire, masters of the stars for 10,000 years, was gone. Destroyed in 14 minutes by a species that most of the galaxy had never heard of. A species from a small blue planet called Earth. Ambassador Nario stood before the Galactic Assembly for the first time. The assembly was held on a massive space station at the center of the known galaxy. Representatives from over 200 species filled the Great Hall. Some were tall and thin, like stretched shadows. Others were short and round. Some had wings. Others had tentacles. All of them were staring at Nari. She was 45 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and calm, steady eyes. Before the invasion, she had been a professor of interstellar law at Seoul National University. Now, she was the voice of humanity to the stars. Thank you for receiving me, she said. Her voice was amplified throughout the hall. Translation devices converted her words into hundreds of languages. The assembly president, a being that looked like a walking tree covered in blue leaves, spoke in a rustling voice. We have many questions, Ambassador. The events of 3 months ago have disturbed many members of this assembly. I understand, Nari replied. I am here to answer your questions and to establish peaceful relations with all who wish them. A representative from a species called the Voss stood up. They looked like giant insects with beautiful crystal wings. You destroyed an empire of 10 billion beings in 14 minutes, the Voss said. How can we trust that you will not do the same to us? Nari was ready for this question. She had expected it to be the first one asked. The Velen attacked us without warning. They gave us 1 hour to surrender or be destroyed. They had already killed 23 species before us. 23 entire peoples, erased from existence. She paused to let that sink in. We did not seek this fight. We did not want this fight. But we were prepared for it and we ended it. But the scale of the response, another representative said, this one looked like a floating cloud of gas. Surely it was excessive. Surely there were other options. Nari shook her head slowly. The Velen had 200 warships in our solar system. They had millions more throughout their empire. If we had only defeated the fleet above Earth, they would have sent another, and another, and another. They would never have stopped until we were extinct. She looked around the hall at the hundreds of faces watching her. We had one chance to end the threat forever. We took it. I am not going to apologize for keeping my people alive. Silence filled the great hall. Many of the representatives shifted uncomfortably. They had never met a species like this before. A species that could speak so calmly about destroying billions. The assembly president spoke again. What does humanity want, Ambassador? Nari smiled. It was a warm smile, not threatening at all. We want peace. We want to trade, to share knowledge, to explore the stars together. We want to learn from you and teach what we know. We want to build a future where no species has to fear extinction from conquerors and the Velen survivors. The Voss representative asked. What will you do with them? This was a difficult question. About 10,000 Velen had survived the crews of the ships that surrendered above Earth. They were currently living on a special station in Earth's solar system, waiting to learn their fate. We are still deciding, Nari admitted. Some of my people want revenge. Others want rehabilitation. The debate continues. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. But I can tell you what we will not do. We will not torture them. We will not experiment on them. We will not keep them as slaves. Whatever else we are not what the Velen were. The assembly began to murmur. Representatives were talking to each other in low voices. Some were nodding. Others were still looking at Nari with fear. The floating cloud being spoke again. There is another question that must be asked. Your weapons, the ones that destroyed the Velen worlds, do they still exist? Nari's expression became serious. Yes, they still exist. And they will continue to exist for as long as there are threats in the galaxy. More murmuring. Some representatives looked frightened. Others looked thoughtful. But I want to make something very clear, Nari continued. Those weapons are not for conquest. They are not for intimidation. They are only for defense. Humanity does not want an empire. We have learned from history our own and the Velens that empires always fall. We want partners, not subjects. The assembly president rustled its blue leaves. And if another species attacks you, Nari met the ancient being's eyes without flinching, and they will learn the same lesson the Velen learned. Humanity does not seek war, but we will never lose one. She stepped back from the podium and took a deep breath. Let me share something with you. Before this crisis, I was a teacher. I taught young people about law and justice and the rights of sentient beings. I believed in diplomacy. I believed in talking through problems. I still believe in these things. She looked around the great hall one final time. But I also believe in survival. I believe that every species has the right to exist, to grow, to reach for the stars. The Velen tried to take that right from us. They failed. And now, for the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy is free from their shadow. Nari gathered her notes and prepared to leave the podium. But before she did, she had one more thing to say. We were never afraid of the dark, she said quietly. We are what the darkness fears. The words hung in the air like a promise and a warning. On Earth. Admiral Tae Kung watched the speech from his home in Busan. He was sitting in his garden, drinking tea and enjoying the spring sunshine. His old bones ached, but his heart was at peace. Captain Yuna Park was there too, visiting her former commander. She had been promoted since the invasion. Now she was responsible for Earth's entire orbital defense network. It was a heavy burden for someone so young. Do you think they believed her? Yuna asked. Tae smiled. It doesn't matter if they believe her. What matters is that they understand her. He set down his tea and looked up at the blue sky. Humanity's awake now. The galaxy knows we are here, and they know what we can do. He closed his eyes. Our job is to make sure they never forget it. Far above the Earth, the stars twinkled with ancient light. Somewhere out there, other species were hearing about the small blue planet that destroyed an empire. Some would be afraid. Others would be curious. A few might even be inspired, and on that small blue planet, 8 billion people continued their lives. They went to work. They raised families. They dreamed of tomorrow. They were no longer alone in the universe, but they were ready for whatever came next.